Hi, friends. Host Eric here. Host Talking with Famous People. I'm here with Susie, uh, Abe, Anthony, Opaloid, Tay, and Jasmine. And we are. I'm about to make this video, and I'll ask the others to chime in as they see fit. Uh, and if they don't chime in, I'll ask for input at a certain point. Anyway, it's about how people listen differently and how people use words differently, and it's specifically about my experience lately with FI and the challenges in dealing with it sometimes, and what I've been taking away from the experience. So first of all, people listen differently to explain what that means is to say, what are people listening for? Abraham talked to me the other night, and he said how he had heard what was being said, but he wasn't listening to the concrete meanings of the words. He was somehow listening to the gist of what was being said without having to have things be clearly defined or mean very specific things. So I also noted this in Sauce when I was trying to talk to him about determinism, and he kept saying things like, well, there just aren't any arguments. It's just a really strong argument, determinism. And it ran afoul of a lot of things in me that want to go, first of all, I don't like determinism. And so I thought I was on his side. Like he was saying his brother's into determinism, but he rejects it. So I started arguing against his brother, hypothetically. But it ended up being Sauce defending determinism and me arguing against Sauce. And of course, the challenge was at a certain point, I said, okay, well, you're saying that we don't have free will, or I don't have free will, or something. Fine. Then what would it look like if I did? And so how would it be different if I did? And he wasn't able to answer that, and there was a breakdown and he was explained it afterwards that he saw it as almost a handicap of me that I need to have things defined in order to communicate effectively. Uh, Whereas he was just, and what I took away after thinking about it was what he was really doing is presenting ideation for us to have shared ideational time with that's constructive, probably. He's hoping we're going to pass back and forth ideas about the thing without establishing positions that one either affirms or negates. So, okay, that's how people take this gist of the idea thing. So, what's the gist of free will? To me, it's not a meaningful question because it's you need to define it before we can get any further. But I understand how others perceive it differently. Now, the other thing people listen for differently, besides, they might not just listen for the gist of the words, they might listen for others' perceptions. That is to say, be looking towards their reactivity, emotional displays, or their displays that are revelatory about hierarchy, namely whether they defer to somebody or expect deference from somebody else. They might be listening for internal consistency that's argumentational. In other words, is the stuff being said by this person consistent with what other things the person has said or other things that the person would have to also affirm to substantiate something? So, in other words, the other things the person has said or things that are logically necessitated by things the person has said. You're looking for consistency on those metrics if you're a TI user. And then lastly, what somebody might um, listen for is external consistency or emotional opportunity. External conformity. External conformity says you're looking, it doesn't mean you're conforming to the outside
He
world.
danced on the battles and he was like,
It means, hey, Abraham, is that you? Can you mute?
it's time.
Uh, okay. Um, uh, it means that you expect the external world to be consistent with your personal interests. That is to say, you have a clear understanding of what you want and how you'd like it to be. Which words you'd like to identify with as consistent with your person. Um, First, any input on that? That's the first. There's not much else to the table before I kind of expand on it a little bit more. But anybody want to comment? Jump in here.
I've got a question.
Hmm.
I'm not sure who said this, but somebody said something along the lines of it's your introverted function which you listen through. So the FI or the TI, NI or I can't remember what the last one is. My brain's dead. But anyway, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. One listens through one's introverted judging function. I would say one
Mm.
listens through either TI or FI. Now, one can listen on an FE basis, sort of, because the interface functions do a little bit of everything else. So, interface function is kind of like a combo function of a judging function, an action function, and a knowledge function. But regardless, I would that resonates as true to me that one listens through one's introverted judging function.
Okay, cool.
Any other comments before I read the last little paragraph here, and then link it back? Okay. How people use words differently. That really means answering the question, why are they talking? Talking because why? Many people treat words as though they were something existent between themselves and reality. In other words, a dog is a symbol for a dog. I'm me, the dog's a symbol that's between me and the dog. It's like a levels thing. Others treat words as though they are manners of expressing agency. That can go as either an essy kind of a thing, like Trump does, where I just sort of say, yeah, well, you're stupid, to throw a wrench into the shit, or whatever. Or it could express as a TE understanding of language, where it says, but these words you're saying, I don't get it because that's not the way things are. I know, we're talking about how things should be. And people go, huh? I think if you get somebody who's really not been exposed to a lot of uh, environments that are less accommodating of their TE, then they may be genuinely confused by the notion that one ought to prioritize consistency on its own merits. Uh, Still, others treat words as variables pointing to the prioritizing the grammar. That's your TI users generally, your first or second slot TI users uh, with NE. And ESTP is probably more likely to use it as a manner of expressing agency. When I was talking to ESTP the other night, and I gave him what I thought was a fun problem, and I thought it was a logical problem, but really what it was a intuition problem. So I think he felt a little taken aback by it, as though I was challenging him. Prove yourself on this or something. I didn't mean to do it that way, but his response to it was very much, well, that's just you're just making too many arguments. Like there's just because you say a lot of words doesn't mean you're right. That kind of a thing. It's a very agency based understanding of the purpose of words. So then finally, there are some people who treat words as experiential catalysts. That they're there to be the manifestation of certain kinds of experiences between yourself and other people. So, for example, if somebody comes and says something like a claim that I might call a claim, they might just call it an opinion or a statement, and they may be throwing it out there because they're hoping to have some kind of additive conversation in which ideas are exchanged and then new ideas are generated without actively critiquing or eliminating ideas as bad. That's done sort of internally, and you don't need to share that or something. Then, yet another way of doing this last manifestation would be to come in and believe that the words are purposed to share personal experience and feel validated and have others do the same to you, like share personal experience so that you can validate them. That would be like a combination of the agency and the uh, and the external conformity. You get that thing going on, that you expect the external world to conform with your feelings, and you have agency as a purpose behind it. Then the purpose of words is to get others to share in this creation of a reality of emotionally gratifying sentences. So anyway, I'm going to pause again for any comments anybody wants to make any, and then I will link it back to a whole overarching. Here's the big takeaway from this kind of a thing. Any comments? Okay. So here's the big takeaway from this thing. What I realized when I would really made me make the table was that when I approached the free will question again today, driving home from work, in my head, I wasn't really approaching the question of it. I was revisiting the argumentation that I had encountered the day before. But I was driving and I asked myself, well, how would I argue it? If I were going to be additive about it, what would I say about it without having to define it? And I'd say, oh, well, regardless of how we define free will, we understand that people do express either more or less reflexively at different times. So, if you kick somebody hard, they're going to say ouch. Not because of their personality type, and not because of their relationship with language or anything like that. It's because there's a reactivity that is necessitated by the active application of force by another. So, what I would say is, in other circumstances, we do have more control. We're less a response, less obviously anyway, a response to immediate stimuli. So, given the fact that we can differentiate on a scale of freedom of will between different instances in our own lives and those we observe around us, then it naturally follows that there be some kind of freedom of choice. And that we don't need to define it further for us to acknowledge that we can seek to be less reflexively an expression of our nature, and to be more mindfully a reflection of our moral agency, and that to do so is worthwhile. So in this example, what I realized at the end of walking through this argumentation chain was the thing you were demanding of him last night, that he provide you a clear definition of free will in order to further talk about it, was not an actual condition I needed to set. It was a choice of my own. I chose to disallow his ideational practice because I preferred to, or chose to, operate in my more native negational approach. It's more native to me, but it's no longer the most optimal way for me to express in a lot of circumstances in which I still might express that fashion. So I think the takeaway from it is simply this. There is a TI unfairness, and it comes from that. When we're asked to help the person we're negating to make their arguments better, which almost never happens, although it should happen all the time. It should happen all the time. When I'm telling somebody they're wrong, why does nobody ask me, okay, well, how could I argue this better? Why does nobody ask me that?
Maybe it's because it's not what they're looking for.
It's not what they're looking for right now, but it's what they're looking for in the future. In the future, they're looking to not have this experience again where they're getting schooled about something.
No, but Eric, I actually talked to Sos about that interaction. And you're right about your processes being different, because from his perspective, he was asking about the topic because he wanted to hear other people's position on it.
But he wasn't
And
asking about it. That's a lie. He was making straight up bold ass claims. I was trying to shift it back onto his brother.
he wanted to talk about it without defending his position.
The thing is, he started the argument on the other side of it. He was against determinism. I started making arguments against determinism, which was additive, and he switched sides.
Well, he weren't looking for a fight or an argument or whatever.
I didn't think I was either. I was actually trying to avoid it because we'd had one earlier in the day. What I'm saying is, the evidence points to him actively looking for a fight, not me. But the evidence points to me bearing the greater responsibility. Well, not actual responsibility. Me bearing a greater weight because I have an intentional priority active presently towards being more mindful about that shit. So it's a self-imposed burden, but regardless, I accept it. You know.
See him as avoidant?
Say again.
Did you see him as avoidant?
I saw him as not wanting to make any progress at all on anything.
Yeah, because he wasn't looking for that.
Okay, but then there's no way to talk about anything that does meaningful ideational work and makes no progress.
Yeah, but your definition of meaningful ideational work is not the same as his.
Right. So that's what I was saying there is he wants, I guess, an additive experiential bonding experience or something that links to
Yes.
ideation, right? That links to ideation. And what I also took away from it is I could have given that to him, and I chose, mostly by allowing myself to be reflexive and go to my defaults rather than by being mindful, for example, I chose to make him do the work instead of doing the work for him. So I could have said, all right, well, here's the deal. We could talk about it without defining it, but we'd have to go about it this way.
Yeah, but you wanted to do a work that's not native to him, and he wasn't looking for it either.
Okay, but see, I concede my own
Yeah.
failures there. But I didn't finish that's not the end of the sentence. I concede my own failures there, okay? I wasn't perfect in the interaction by any means. And in fact, this video is about what I can do differently in the future when dealing with FI users. But to position it as solely my responsibility that conflict occurred, that to the extent that I am attributing extra responsibility to me, it's a self-imposed burden. The reality, the facts are what they are. If you want to look at the facts, then you'd probably attribute more blame to him. At least at the initial cause of it, because like I said, he started on the other side. I was trying to argue with him. He switched sides. He wasn't just whatever. He was making bold ass claims.
Do you see that as aggressing towards your native argument style?
Well, I want to give the thing respect. I want to give the statement respect, which means I want to say, okay, well, what do you mean by this? Let's find out exactly what you mean, and let's look at it together. But he sees me saying, well, let's find out exactly what you mean, as itself aggressive.
Yes.
Right. So I mean, then there's nothing that can be said about that. It's if you're using words, you're expecting me to glean meaning from them, and you're telling me I can't seek information from you about what they mean. I mean, the only person who can be blamed is Sauce then.
How can you blame an ENFP for that?
Well, are we not attempting to attribute blame here?
If you want.
That wasn't my goal initially, but what you said is you need to behave differently with the FI users or something. Or be nicer or something.
It goes both ways. But the thing is, I wasn't here for all of it. But his experience is that you're playing your grounds and more people in the room work on your level, and then people start agreeing with you, and then he experienced that as being ganged up upon.
Okay.
That's not the case. That's not the case, but that's the experience that's left behind.
Okay, well, what is the case is the kind of advocacies he was making yesterday about the capitalism shit and all that stuff. I mean, that contributes directly to actual violence against actual people. That kind of wrongness is dangerous.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, especially if you're talking about public policy, the determinism in question was a separate issue. There were 2 fights we had yesterday. When he's talking about public policy.
No, but Eric, is this about policy or about communication?
Well, I'm saying it's about communication, which means we necessarily have to factor in that we have to communicate differently about public policy than about, say, philosophy, than, say, about your personal life.
True.
So, I mean, the thing is, I guess I feel guilty somewhat about the determinism conversation. I don't feel guilty about the public policy conversation, because I would be just as stern if you were to say, well, I think the cops should just get to be able to shoot anybody they think is a bad character. I trust the cops. I get mad at you about that. Sauce doesn't say words that are obviously meaning that, but that's the impact of his argumentation. If we affirm those statements, we are advocating in favor of unjust violence against innocent people. And I'm not okay with that. And nobody else should be either. Sauce shouldn't be okay with it either. That's one of those areas where you go, okay, I don't have enough TI to make wise decisions about policy. I'm going to listen to Eric.
So we should just take it from you and shut up.
Not you. I'm not saying that anybody should just do that. I'm saying you've got choices. You can come actually argue it, or you can be apolitical, or if you want to be political but you don't have the capacity to argue it or don't have the want to, then you can mimic my positions. That's safe. I'm right. There's lots of things you can do. But what you can't do is make a bunch of bold-ass fucking wrong claims that advocate violence against innocent people and expect me not to shove it back up your fucking ass.
I kind of agree with Eric on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I feel like...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like maybe he had a bad experience, but I think he didn't know what he was getting himself into.
Yeah. Anyway, this is intended to be a bridging video, a communicative bridge video.
Just talking about it, you get riled up.
Well, you asked me to parse out the specifics of the 2 conversations. I got riled up about one of them.
True.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.